Hello, welcome to another IATEFL Live. I am here with Margit Szesztay, who is going to talk to us about 5-minute well-being activities for learners. Margit, thank you very much for joining us today. Can you tell us a few things about your IATEFL journey?
My IATEFL journey. Well, the first time I went to an IATEFL conference was when I was a beginner teacher, and that was like many years ago, 30 years ago. And I was really inspired by the buzz and, meeting so many people. And it was just not just professionally, but also socially, a really exciting event. And, I really got hooked. And I've been involved with IATEFL for many, many years in many positions and in various capacities. And that's also because community building that's why I became a teacher, really, too. That's what kind of attracted me to the teaching profession. So when I'm working with teacher trainees back home in my university context in Budapest, then one of my aims is always to build an inclusive, diverse community.
I see. And so you mentioned that you work with teacher trainees.
That's right.
What are you most passionate about?
What am I most passionate about? One of the things is groups and group creativity. And I think groups have amazing potential that we need to tap into. Groups can also act in very stupid ways. But I think that through education, there is a potential to kind of not just to be creative individually, but to kind of get aligned and be creative together. And that can be not just through arts, but to have a creative conversation. And I think that that's a really important thing to kind of develop in ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, you will be presenting at the conference. Can you tell us a few things about your presentation?
Yeah, so my presentation, my workshop, it's a workshop actually, is called 5-minute activities for learner well-being. Now that's a little like, wow, I mean, you can't really create well-being in 5 minutes, but really the thinking behind it is that, the world has changed and oftentimes students enter our classrooms in a kind of frazzled state of mind or in an anxious state of mind. And that could be because, they have deadlines to meet, they have assignments to hand in, but there's also a more diffuse sense of anxiety that comes from just the state of the world. There's the war in Ukraine. Hungary is a neighboring country. There is climate change. There's so many issues. And even if students it's not in the center of their mind, it's in the background. So there is a lot of anxiety. There is also, being in smartphone mode. So when my students come into the class, they're literally like in a symbiotic relationship with their smartphones. And if I say, okay, class starts, put your phones away, they do it, most of them. But they still are in that frame of mind, in that state of mind. So for these reasons, I think we have to rethink. I felt like I had to rethink how I start my lessons. I mean, ELT has a tradition of you starting with a warmer. We've had that for a long time. But for me, it encouraged me to kind of be a little bit more purposeful and conscious about the warmers that I do, because it's not just to move into English or to do something fun, but to kind of have a little ritual where students disconnect from this busy, anxious, and often, smartphone mindset, and to like tune in. Here I am, ready to learn, and to also tune into group mode and working together. So that's what the workshop is going to be about. We're going to try out a couple of activities and share experiences of, what people do to help learners get into a more relaxed, more connected, ready for learning state of mind.
This is great. I absolutely agree with you that mobile phones are the extension of their arm. So it's very difficult to disconnect them from their digital world as well. So is the session going to relate to teenage learners, young learners, adult learners?
Yeah, I mean, just related to what you said, it's not just them, it's us and everyone. I mean, maybe I'm not to the extent that my learners who are between the age of 19 and the 25, but recently I went to the hairdresser, and the hairdresser told me that she can't have a conversation with the people who go to see her anymore because they're just looking down and looking at their phones. And it's even difficult to to do the haircut in a proper way because they're moving around and looking down. So this is just like a little thing that also illustrates this change. So it's not really, well, I work at a university context, so my learners are between the age of 19 and 25. But I think everybody needs to disconnect. So my workshop is more related maybe to teenagers and young adults, but I think it relates a little bit to all of us, teachers included. Yeah,
absolutely, yes, definitely. And after the pandemic, do you think that our relationship with technology has become worse or better?
Well, I don't think it has become worse. I think maybe our relationship with each other has become worse because I really enjoyed teaching online actually. So I enjoyed that more too. It took me a while to get into it, but I saw the potential. But for me and for many of my students in particular, moving back into face-to-face mode was even harder because of the isolation, or they got unused to this kind of face-to-face contact, this kind of moving into group mode and listening to one another. So I think that's one of the things that has happened, that it has become harder to focus, to listen, to be there in real life.
Absolutely. Now, can I ask you for a favor? Can we do a practice exercise together? Because in your abstract, you mentioned that you will be showing some breathing exercises for our well-being.
Yeah.
So what is one exercise that we can do now together?
Well, there is, for example, the box breathing. Box breathing, I learned this from actually a medical practitioner called Rangan Chatterjee. And first of all, the aim is just to focus on our breathing. And usually we don't focus on our breathing, we do it automatically.
Sure.
And then to kind of, box breathing means that you breathe in for the count of 4. Yeah, then you hold it for a count of 4. Then you breathe out for a count of 4, and you pause for a count of 4. So breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then pause, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the box breathe. I mean, I couldn't talk and breathe at the same time, but I wouldn't recommend starting with that because I do some of these things might be a bit odd. So we are actually also changing the culture of the classroom. Oh. So maybe because students are not used to like breathing exercises or grounding activities or doing things that might be a bit odd to begin with. But once you do a couple of things, and they realize that actually, this is good. Like maybe start with something like, how are you feeling? I mean, we ask that question lots of times, but we don't really pause and think about, how am I feeling? So like, how are you feeling just now? And then maybe think of a weather-related phrase to capture that. So are you feeling like, blue skies? Or are you feeling like downpour inside? And then, share that. Or that the feeling could also be like choose a picture that captures how you're feeling at the moment. And then, just experience that and then share that with the rest of us. So that could be a gentler way in doing things like that, or doing an activity called the cloakroom. So when you go to the theater, you go to the cloakroom and you kind of, leave things that you don't need, like your umbrella and hat. And the same way, metaphorically, there is a box, which is like the cloakroom, and you write down your worries or things that block you from learning, and you put that into this cloakroom box. So these are kind of like little ways in to doing something like a breathing exercise or a stretch break, which initially might be a little bit strange for some of the learners.
But this will in turn help the students to work in unison together and connect as human beings, not only as a class, but as human beings too.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, this is wonderful, Margit. Thank you very much for joining us today. I cannot wait for your presentation. So thank you very much for joining us. Before we go, have you got any advice for the teachers who might be struggling with burnout or with any negative feelings?
Well, the obvious one, make sure that you have a good work-life balance. I know that's hard to do. And maybe a more practical one is do things in the classroom that give you energy. And finally, we as human beings tend to always focus on the negative. So somebody said that we are like Teflon for good experiences, they just roll off, and like Velcro for bad experiences, so we stick to them. So maybe you'll have like a problem or one student who doesn't pay attention and you still worry about that. So, try to just relax more and do things that you enjoy, so that your students it can be like this enjoyment and relaxation can spread in the classroom.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us. And I hope that you got something too.